Awareness is the first step to change, but what if awareness is also where you get stuck?
For some, how might it be that self-awareness can become something to hide behind as opposed to something to act upon?
It's like a mirror. You're just staring into it and going, yeah, that is what it is. I don't want to change it. I don't want to walk through it. Welcome back to another episode of Unapologetic Rabble-Rousers. I'm Doc Shellie.
And I'm Carla Lewis. So we're going to keep it kind of feisty.
Imagine that.
No, I know, really? I know. Wasn't quite sure. Shall we call it self-awareness is a trap?
Sounds good.
Yeah. The dark side of knowing better and not doing better.
Ooh.
There are so many directions this could go.
Yeah.
But following our last one, it seems it's just fitting that we have something that actually moves. And what we're going to be talking about is that whole notion about the self-awareness. If that's the first step, what's next? So let's dig into some of the traps, some of the excuses, some of the craziness about being self-aware and then not leveraging that knowledge to actually do something with it.
Yeah. I liked the quote that came up when we were first talking about this that said, awareness is the first step to change. But what if awareness is also where you get stuck?
All right.
Because we talk about self-awareness all the time, right?
Yes, we do.
And so I thought it was interesting that awareness can also be where you get stuck. And then just in general, sometimes we know better, but that also can become an excuse to not do better. So lots of stuff to cover.
Okay, so where do we want to take this first? Is it about perhaps just our own self-awareness, forget that we're in a leadership role, or just personally, whether or not you're in a leadership role? Self-awareness, the whole point of it is to be able to recognize perhaps it's habits, perhaps it's in assumptions that we make. It's last time we even talked about go-to emotions, where a certain trigger event happens and we just automatically go to anger or frustration or fear. So talking about self-awareness and the so what. The so what? Okay, so you want to be self-aware. I have a lot of knowledge that you don't leverage. What's the point? What's the point? I'm asking you.
The point of self-awareness is to, typically, how I use it is to think through and process through any given situation, relationship, and sometimes if I think about that first quote, that it can also become where we get stuck. The more awareness we have, the more roadblocks we might be creating for ourselves. So we don't actually make that change. And when you become aware of something, you gain an insight of something, neurologically, you get a dopamine hit. You don't actually have to make the change.
Okay.
You get the dopamine hit from an insight from changing. You know, that whole, what do they call it? Analysis paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, those people are getting a dopamine hit from their analysis paralysis because they're looking at more and more data and they're finding more and more things. So it's a neurological response that keeps them in that analysis paralysis. They know they need to make a decision. They know better. But the neurochemistry keeps going, this feels so good.
It's so curious how many different ways that notion of the dopamine hit, the thing that facilitates almost addictive behavior, because as you've just pointed out, going in and analyzing and then getting some, so here's another level that we could take, and there's some excitement in that. And that excitement with the dopamine says, keep going, keep going. But there isn't a natural I don't know, I was going to say there isn't a natural strength, but is there a natural inclination to say, oh, okay, you know what? That's enough dopamine for now. Let's go ahead and do something based on this exploration that we've gone through. It's what is it? There's the dopamine we understand. It's a chemical. It's something that delivers pleasure and satisfaction. And I'm sure there are better words to describe it, but those are the ones that came up for me right now. But what is it to interrupt that pattern? What is it that, and this is a little bit off topic, so I'll just drop the question because I don't want to take us off on a different tangent, that if we are in pursuit of this self-awareness and we're getting some satisfaction, at least of the learning, there does have to come a point where you do something with what you've learned.
Do you have to?
So that's another question. No, it is. Because
It is.
when we started thinking about this as a topic today, I'm thinking, okay, self-awareness, is it in and of itself fine? Just, oh, look at that. I'm newly aware of this, my propensity, my assumption, my knee-jerk reaction. So what? So maybe you don't have to do anything with your awareness.
I think sometimes you don't, but I think you have to examine it and think through it. If I do make a change, is it good for me or is it bad for me? I might come up with a new reason why I do something, and I may not want to change it. So I think you can look at that kind of like that dopamine hit a couple ways. From I can have a new insight from my self-awareness and I don't need to change anything. It also can be a stall tactic or a form of avoidance, right?
Yes.
So if I need to keep process, that could become avoidance. So I think there's some real differences and nuances in how our brains work around this. Because yes, self-awareness and that new insight can give you a hit of dopamine. For me, I know that the bigger hit of dopamine comes when I make a change. I apply what I learn. I know that about myself. So yeah, that little hit of dopamine feels good, but what feels really effing great is a bigger dopamine hit.
Which you recognize comes from acting upon the awareness.
Yeah, I mean, years of acting upon the awareness.
Right. Okay. And for some, how might it be that self-awareness can become something to hide behind as opposed to something to act upon?
It's like a mirror. You're just staring into it and going, yeah, that is what it is. I don't want to change it. I don't want to walk through it. Some people don't like change. So
No.
that idea of that insight requiring change or mandating change, people are like, yeah, no, that ain't happening.
So there's the awareness that we seek and the awareness that hits us in the face. The ones
Yeah.
that maybe we weren't seeking.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think if I think about how it might show up, right? So we're talking about looking at self awareness, you're working on yourself. It also feels exhausting and you're stuck. You're over analyzing every thought and every interaction to go, ooh, what could I do better? Or I don't care about the impact I have on other people. People might judge themselves because they're still struggling and they know better, but they don't do better. They don't do anything about it. So there's like a lot of different ways that it can show up.
I think there's also the fact that you don't always have to be aware that you're digging into, you're not focused. I think sometimes it's not about digging in and saying, I want to become self-aware. It's becoming aware of something and determining whether or not this awareness of yourself in reaction, triggered as you are by circumstances or people or whatever it might be, that self-awareness in the moment, for me, feels like that is a gift. There's a gift if you become aware of the fact that in the moment something triggers for you and you go, whoa, look at that. Now, it may or may not be something that you want to go ahead and explore further, but just being aware of what's going on inside you, your thoughts, your feelings, your natural responses, all of those things, that awareness is something to be celebrated until it becomes something that we recognize and just ignore from that point forward. If something is enough to make you aware, it seems to me it would be something enough to spend a little time considering, like a nanosecond or two to say, "Ooh, where'd that come from? What's going on for me?" No, no, it seems a rather slippery slope. You get to the top of Mount Self-Awareness, and are
Mountain
you going to
self-awareness.
fall off on one side, or are you going to ski down and navigate what you discover on the way? I don't know. Mount Saint Self-Awareness. Nah, interesting metaphor.
Do you have anything that you've been aware of for a long time, but you haven't actually changed, even though maybe you wanted to?
Mm, that would suggest I'm very self-aware. Yeah, my weight. Or no, I think that would probably be it. It would have things to do with how I manage myself, how I manage perhaps those times when I consciously start going down rabbit holes
Hmm.
because I'm getting more satisfaction from that than completing whatever it is that I was working on. And what's interesting is that changed a lot from when I was an employee.
Hmm.
There was, I had no interest in being distracted. And in the last probably 15 years of my employment as an employee of another company, I was loving my life. I was loving the people I was working with and the work that I was doing. And I had no interest in being distracted from it. I as much love the work I'm doing now as I did then. What's interesting though, and we've talked about this how many dozens of times, that the commitment when you don't have that external, so when you don't have a commitment you've made to somebody else, but you've made that commitment to yourself,
Hmm.
that's one of the things that has been a challenge. And I've talked openly about that. It isn't a challenge when I'm working with a client, but when I'm just working on my stuff and I'm honing this and freshening that and doing whatever, I'm more easily distracted.
Hmm.
And that's what I'm working on. And it's making a big difference. How about for you?
Yeah. It's interesting because I can't think of anything currently that I've been aware of and haven't changed. I mean, there's probably a couple things, but it's when I think of that question, I go back to probably 10, 15 years ago. I worked with someone who this guy, he was that person that would walk in the room and go, "Good morning, everyone," and everyone would roll their eyes. Like he had this persona that he portrayed that he was the smartest person in the room. He was the sage on the stage, and he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, including myself. And it got to the point where I was like, I don't care for this person. But at some point, I felt like I was violating my own values because I wasn't mean to him, but I certainly wasn't kind to him. I kind of ignored him. I wouldn't engage in conversation with him. Like the whole good morning thing, it might be a wave of the hand if I acknowledged it at all or a nod of the head. Normally, when someone says good morning to me, I say good morning. And he was the kind of person that would ask for feedback but didn't really want it. And if you ask
Oh,
me for feedback, you're going to get feedback.
that's right.
And so then when he would ask, I would just say, it's fine. You're not going to actually listen to my feedback. So there was a lot of feeling like I was starting to violate my own standards and my own values. And I
Hmm.
thought, how can I let this one person, this went on for months. Like, how can I let this one person impact me this way? So my self awareness went through this whole loopy loop de loop de loop of just because he's an idiot doesn't mean you need to be a jackass back to him. You don't need to treat him differently than you would anyone else. And I literally had to break it down to he's a human being. He's worthy of respect. Whether he gives it to me or not doesn't matter.
Hmm.
And so it took a long time to process through that kind of why am I letting this one person make me act different than I normally would?
Hmm.
So that's a very long answer to that question. But so I did eventually change it. But it took a long time and it took some deep reflection and self awareness to really think about how do I improve this. And I'll tell you what, when I started to change how I reacted to him, who did a lot of people get mad at me
Oh, okay. So
because
you
I
sold
started to
out.
then, yeah, like I changed the whole group dynamic, right? Because I stepped out of that group and went, I'm not going to be a jerk to this guy anymore.
So you sold out and it affected the group.
That's what they thought.
Wow.
It was very interesting. So I think when we think about that, self awareness can come in so many different forms. So
Mm.
it's a great tool to have in your toolbox. I think it's important to recognize that self awareness is not the destination. The change that you can come from it or the recognition of the insight is what is really where that power lies.
And
Makes any sense?
recognizing first that that is an insight
Yeah.
and then making a conscious decision about how it's going to be applied in how you are with your just yourself or how you are with other people. And in this particular case, he said, okay, wait, I'm violating my own values by treating this person less than one who deserves respect, and me being true to who I am in
Hmm.
my response as opposed to engaging in group behavior.
That was the biggest insight for me was I'm violating my own values and standards because before there was all sorts of justification,
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of justification. There was collusion amongst the group. So for me, when I recognize that I am indeed violating my own values and standards, that doesn't feel too good. That's not a dopamine hit.
No.
So yeah, so it's an interesting journey to go through because there was a lot of self-awareness. There was a lot of I don't care, he deserves it from everyone. There there was a lot of rationalizing, excusing, and just being okay with it until a certain point. And it was like, ooh, no, that one hurts. We're gonna change this.
And isn't that really a wonderful depiction of the journey? It starts with your, and it doesn't start before the behavior. Here's the behavior. This is what it is. And you talked about rationalization, justification, collusion, but
Mm-hmm.
being able to say, okay, if I'm comfortable with this as me, not as a member of this group, but as me, then okay. And if I'm not, now I'm doing something about it. And interesting how you were able to reflect on how your change affected everybody.
Oh yeah, they were mad.
And that's what happens, though, as we, in our self awareness, make determinations to act more in accordance to act more in accordance with who we are when we're being true to ourselves, our
Mm-hmm.
values, the who we want to be, the how we want to be treated and respected.
Mm-hmm.
And that ripple effect, can't ignore it, especially if we've been in a relationship like was this team, this group. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that they were a team, but it's this group of people who were subjected to what you described. It's interesting. We need to be
Mm-hmm.
aware that when we own our self-awareness and more importantly what comes of that, and we make adjustments based on being more true to self,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to have a ripple effect. It can't help but, because now what other people were expecting ain't happening.
Right.
And now they have to go through a change of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't ask for it.
No, they sure didn't.
So if we could leave the listeners with some guidance around what even to be considering if one wants to become aware of their own self in a given situation, triggers or what to do and so what might be some parting wisdom, Doc Shelley?
I think you got to think about perhaps where in your life are you waiting to feel ready instead of taking that small next step? Are you deliberately stuck in that analysis paralysis stuff? Are you constantly pursuing a new insight? Are you avoiding that next step? And so I think part of that is I'll say detaching from being ready. You're most likely never going to actually be ready. You
Mm-hmm.
just got to do it anyway. And then think about, I don't know, a small, one small thing that you might want to change. What is something imperfect? Not that we're striving for perfection by any mean, but what's something imperfect that has been in the back of your head for a long time that you want to change? And start to interrupt that loop
Mm-hmm.
by experimenting with things and trying things differently instead of continuing to search for more and more introspection. Try something different, see how that feels. You might get a bigger dopamine hit.
Oh, and we're all in for that.
Yeah. I think knowing yourself is really powerful. And living like you believe what you know, that's where that personal freedom starts.
Wow. Thank you. With that, I'm Carla Lewis.
I'm Doc Shelley. We'll see you next time. Knowing yourself is really powerful. And living like you believe what you know, that's where that personal freedom starts.